Michael has been a reporter-producer at the Center for Investigative Reporting for quite some time now, but he started his career in the Balkans. I think he made some reference to that. So he was here on a Fulbright and stayed during the period I think Yugoslavia was breaking apart, and did a lot of reporting, and then spent some time in a couple other positions. So and a couple really good things is that he's on the WPI Board of Directors, which we're very happy about. And he also, when he was a student at Macalester College, and our program was longer, he drove the WPI fellows around in a van. So that's his most important credential. And they survived. So anyway, without further ado, we're going to now have the podcast series on how podcasts are transforming journalism, the story of the Bulgarian crypto queen, and podcasting as a revenue stream. And we have one panelist that Michael will introduce that will be here virtually on the screen. So Michael?
Thanks, David. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks again to the World Press Institute and the America for Bulgaria Foundation for making all this happen. Yeah, we're going to talk about podcasts. We're going to change things up a little bit. We're going to hear some audio. And I'm really excited because we're going to hear about really one of my all-time favorite podcasts. And the reason we're doing that is it's a tremendously good example of what you can do when you merge narrative podcasts and investigative journalism. There's lots of different kinds of podcasts. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. And podcasts are really flexible. You can apply them to lots of different kinds of news formats. The technology is relatively simple and inexpensive, at least compared to video. People can listen on their own time. On smart devices. They can do it while driving or washing the dishes or whatever, and that's one reason it's so popular. The best podcasts, the best narrative podcasts, are like great films and novels. They've got strong plots and characters. They immerse you in a place or in an event. They feel authentic. They challenge you. And in the context of public service journalism, and investigative journalism, a podcast done well can reach a large audience and a diverse audience and a young audience. And it can have impact, and it can also bring in a little bit of revenue, although it's not a silver bullet. So, as I mentioned, we're going to explore a style of podcast that merges narrative storytelling and investigative reporting. It's a limited series podcast, or a serial. It plays out, in this case, 9 episodes, I believe. And we're also going to get some practical ideas on what a newsroom, and even a small newsroom, can do to embrace this platform. So let me first introduce our panelists. On the line from London is Jamie Barrett. Bartlett, sorry, Jamie. Jamie is a writer, broadcaster, and commentator. His main topics are cybersecurity, online privacy, new political movements, social media, and internet cultures. He wrote and presented the hit podcast we're going to be talking about, The Missing Crypto Queen, which, if you haven't heard it, it's about a cryptocurrency scam called OneCoin that started here in Bulgaria, or at least I guess think we can say that. To my left, Nikolai Stoyanov is an investigative journalist and finance editor at Capital Weekly, where he has worked since 2006. Some of his most prominent investigations include a series of stories documenting the demise of Corporate Commercial Bank. His investigation into OneCoin, which is what we're going to be talking about, has been widely recognized and often quoted in international media. And if you've listened to the podcast, Nikolai's voice is going to be familiar. And Camilla Bath, we met earlier on the last panel. She's a journalist, editor, media trainer based in South Africa, and has done a lot of podcasts. I just want to ask, how many people in this room listened to a podcast in the last week? That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I mean, I know there's podcasts here in Bulgaria, and quite a few of them. I could try to talk a lot more, and I don't want to, and I could try to talk about this podcast, but I think, first of all, I want to play you the introduction that they created for this podcast that was released in 2018. It's about 2 minutes, a little over 2 minutes long. So why don't we roll that tape?
So do you remember I was telling you about that cryptocurrency?
Actually, it's the other cut. It's not that one.
And I said...
One family! You're amazing, guys.
Dr. Rouge, Ruja promised to make the world rich through a revolutionary new cryptocurrency.
I believe what makes us different is our vision. We are more than just one coin. We create the world around this coin.
Within 2 years, she was packing out arenas around the world with believers who'd invested in her idea.
It was called the Bitcoin Kira. Ruja Ignatova, she's an ingenious lady.
Dr. Ruja started appearing at events all over the world, spreading the OneCoin gospel, arguing with bankers and gaining legions of devoted followers. And always dressed in silk gowns, diamonds, and her signature red lipstick. Try to imagine a cross between Belle from Beauty and the Beast and Steve Jobs.
We have very, very ambitious goals. This is just the beginning.
Her company made billions from global investors. It's amazing, actually. I don't know, everyone, as soon as we mentioned her name, it just caused this great furore.
She called herself the Crypto Queen.
And then, 2 years ago, she disappeared.
Kidnapping, killing. We were warned for this.
We're looking for somebody. Join me, Jamie Bartlett, as I search for Dr. Ruja and the truth about her company, OneCoin. Do you know where she is?
No idea where.
Doesn't know where she is.
What's her name?
Ruja.
I think I might have heard something that someone was there and like the whole organizer of everything. It's cult. It's very cult-like.
What sort of thing were you worried might happen?
Getting shot?
You know when you get like a feeling, like suddenly you sort of feel like the mood changes a bit and suddenly you feel a little bit uncomfortable about being somewhere. From BBC Sounds, The Missing Crypto Queen. Subscribe now.
We'll both know the truth very soon.
That's great. So that gives you a... Sorry, stepping on that great music. So that gives you a really clear picture of what the story is, and usually a good story you should be able to sum up in a sentence or two, and they do that really well. So I just want to toss to Jamie and Nikolai. So how did this come about, and what was it initially that grabbed you about this story? Because I'm sure there weren't a lot of things you knew. But Nikolai, you started reporting on this in 2016.
It's 2015 actually. It was. So it's. The whole story started for me like about less than a year after OneCoin started. It was launched sometime in the autumn of 2014.
And OneCoin was the name of this currency.
Yeah. And actually, I first got interested in the story because of Ruja Ignatova herself, the woman we've heard just a minute ago. And she appeared out of nowhere. Nobody knew who she was. And in the, I think it was the spring of 2015, she bought a really huge mansion in Sofia. It's like a landmark building. It used to be a famous restaurant. And she took out 4.2 million euro, I guess. It was the sum. And not a bank loan, not something, and just bought this building, which sounded strange. She appeared and said, okay, I have this cryptocurrency business. And we were like, okay, we should get interested into that. And just as we were starting to dig into it, 1 or 2 months after that, she bought another building. And it's also like a very famous house, just opposite the houses of the parliament in Sofia. If you have time, you can stroll along and look at it. And it's built 100 years ago. It used to be the home of a former mayor, and etc. And she bought it for 5 million euro. And we were like, okay, what kind of business do you have that we don't know of? We are a business media, and you buy property for 10 million euro. It seems strange for us. And yeah, that's the moment I started looking to it. I had been reporting on various MLM scams, Ponzi schemes before that. So the structure seemed a lot fishy for me.
A mysterious stranger with lots of money starts buying up prominent buildings.
Scheme and all the things that raise red flags for you whenever you hear them. So we contacted her and said we want an interview. And she was really busy. We actually contacted her spokesperson or whoever it was in the company. She's flying around the world, and I guess in a month or so, we arranged a meeting. We did an interview with her, and we put it in the newspaper alongside the story, which didn't name it explicitly a Ponzi scheme, but tried to raise all the possible red flags.
So you had suspicions from the beginning about the business?
Yes, I think the moment I saw the first presentations, there were already some. So there weren't major articles before we started reporting it or anything, but there was suspicions in some forums, in some specialized websites and etc. And to me it seemed pretty obvious that something's not right.
Jamie, I want to ask you, when did you come across this story, and what was it about it that really got you to be willing to spend a couple of years working on on this story?
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me. Hi, Nikolai. Great to see you.
Hey.
I owe Nikolai about 3 beers. I keep promising him I'm going to be in Sofia to repay the debt. He was instrumental in all of our work, so he was there way before me. To me, what was, and probably for the BBC, what was most interesting is the BBC for a long time had been looking for a story that was exciting about cryptocurrency. This brand new technology, everyone's talking about it. Some people are losing money, some people are gaining money, it's complicated, it's a buzzword. How do you make an interesting story out of that? Long form. There's lots of little articles here and there, but they're all very sort of sector specific, financial business sector specific. So the minute I went to the commissioners with Georgia Cat, the producer, and said, we've got a story that's about cryptocurrencies, but it's really a Ponzi scheme run by, or founded by a woman who's disappeared, and we're going to try and find the woman. They immediately thought, this is the story. It's a story really about a hunt for a person. And through that hunt, you can tell the story of how cryptocurrency works, how Ponzi schemes work. For them, what was so exciting, and for me too, if you listen to the episodes of the podcast, you can hear it. There's a thread running through it, which is what's happened to Ruja Ignatova and how do we find her. And we branch off in every episode about money laundering, about cryptocurrency design, about sort of fear of missing out. So it was the combination of the two things together, the ability to write about technology through a kind of exciting, fast-moving drama that's really appealed to both me and the BBC specifically.
So you, kind of like Nikolai, you knew at the outset that this was an interesting story. I mean, you didn't need convincing, you didn't need to do a lot of reporting before you knew that.
It takes you 5 minutes to work out that this is an unusual story because of the elements I've described. All you needed to do was to look at some of the promotional videos to think, I don't even need to look into the company records. Something interesting is happening here. Even if it wasn't a big scam, it would have been interesting. How did somebody create a hybrid between a cryptocurrency and a multi-level marketing company? That's interesting. Even the fact that Ruja Ignatova was one of the very, very few women at the top of a cryptocurrency company was itself fascinating. There were so many fascinating elements to it. And one quick thing that I've noticed, no one in mainstream media tends to report on multi-level marketing. They think it's this weird little world of Tupperware sellers and Avon and Herbalife. But it's a huge world, and it's a fascinating world because it brings in human psychology and why do you believe in things and how do you convince people to believe your dream and the promise of getting rich quick. But it was kind of ignored by a lot of mainstream media. So there was also that element. I was fascinated by the multi-level marketing culture. It was so different to anything else I'd seen.
And so one of the things that's, I think, is great about the podcasts and other good podcasts is it feels really authentic. We follow you in the reporting process. We hear you facing challenges, frustrations, and it makes it all the more interesting. And so I wanted to ask both of you, what were some of your biggest challenges in trying to do this story, separate from trying to find Dr. Ruja?
Well, Nikolai, do you want that for Nikolai or for me first?
Okay, well, I can go first. And for me, I think it was different than for Jamie because earlier on there was less information. So when I started reporting on it, and it was about two years before Jamie hopped into the story, and
all right, yeah, hopped in, come on.
Hopped in, yeah. You stole the world fame. And back then, we didn't know it is that big or something like that. It could have been just the other MLM scheme. Every day throughout the world, tens of them pop in, pop out, and they take some money and disappear, and it's usually $1 million or $2 or nothing that spectacular, and that's why this is like a fraud. It is not something that media catch up because it rarely goes that big or become that famous or important, and yeah, I guess it was luck in the beginning because I ran into this story while, yeah, it might have been anything not that important. I followed it up several months after that to look what's happening. It's still alive. The events they make are getting bigger and more polished in a way, and all the other things. She appeared on a conference, like in a hotel room like that, which was organized by The Economist. And it's, wow, well, don't they look into that? And even before the conference happened, I sent them questions, and I said, okay, have you looked at this? And probably, yeah, we see it's your sponsor and etc., but you are endorsing something strange. And nevertheless, the conference happened. They didn't have anything that suspicious about it. And the logo of OneCoin was just above Visa's, for example. And it looked strange. Half the Bulgarian government was at that conference. It was like an East European meeting of summit, or I don't remember the whole name right now. So for me, it was a lot of digging into local registers and following which company changed hands and what happened like that. It wasn't something that you see that much, and probably that's why my reporting on it was a bit more fragmented. It's articles, follow-ups to the articles. It wasn't something that consistent. Well, there are news that London police is investigating. You can, okay, we add a little piece of that. Then there is some change in the corporate structure. We report on that, and it's like 20 articles, which is like a patchwork of things.
Jamie, what about you? I mean, you had to make a podcast as well, which is its own challenge. But you early on, we meet this woman from Scotland who ends up losing a fair amount of money, and people that she had encouraged to buy this currency also lose money. So there's a lot of emotion there. But in terms of the reporting, I mean, you eventually did someone got some real numbers that led you to be able to report that we were talking about $4 billion. What other challenges did you have?
Well, I mean, I guess a lot of the people here are journalists. They understand there's a lot of the traditional problems about receiving leaked documents without being able to be certain about their veracity, legal challenges with a company that was operating in 175 different countries. So when you talk about it, some countries had sort of issued various warnings about it, others hadn't. You had to be kind of careful. We knew they had, maybe less so by the time we were on it, but very good legal teams that would be supporting them. A lot of complicated ownership structures that you want to be able to report on, but are so boring when you discuss it in a podcast that people will just switch off. So there was a lot of things that we would like, but the convenient thing about a podcast is you can kind of ignore some of that stuff. In an article, you have to be a bit more comprehensive. In a podcast, you commission some beautiful music, make it into a mystery. The challenge was we didn't always know the answers to certain questions because there was so much mystery surrounding it. But with a podcast, you embrace that. You make that part of it. We don't know yet. We're going to keep looking. We'll be back next week with more. And that was it. That turned what would have been a problem into an advantage, really, because people liked the mystery. You don't finish articles saying, hopefully I'll come back. Don't really know what's going on. Not sure, but I might be right, I might be wrong. That wouldn't get you very far.
Never end a story with time will tell, right?
Yeah. So the podcast allows you to embrace some of the challenges that traditional journalism faces. So that was actually really good. Strictly from a podcasting perspective, the issue for the BBC commissioning it was, okay, guys, we're interested in the story. We'll write up a budget. What's the ending going to be? Well, we don't know. Well, you're going to find her, right? That's episode 8. Don't know. So we had to convince the commissioners that we couldn't be sure how the story would actually unfold. And we were sort of making them as we were putting them out. We'd put episode 4 out and we still hadn't finished episode 5, and it was due in 7 days' time. So it was very stressful, but we again thought we'll try something different here. We'll let the listener know that we're on a journey together. Simultaneously, a lot of the big American podcasts, which are brilliantly produced, they're fantastically made, they've all been made 6 months ago, and then you get one released by week. So we thought, no, let's try to actually make this real time. So we don't know what's in episode 7 either. And it's only going to be out in 3 weeks. So that was very, very stressful. And we had to really convince the commissioners that it would work and that people would enjoy feeling like they were on a journey with us.
That is frightening, to begin a series that you haven't finished and you don't know the ending. That is, I don't know.
Your podcast is one of the only formats that will allow you to do that, because you can make an episode 15 minutes long or an hour long, depending on the material that you get. And because we weren't constrained by deadlines in the sense that it was going out on the radio, there was 1 week where we just couldn't get it done in time and we had to travel somewhere last minute to Frankfurt. So instead of a full episode, we put a 2-minute episode out that we recorded on our phone that basically said, we're at the airport, we're going somewhere, we can't tell you, but we'll be back next week. And people went crazy for this. There was so much speculation online. But we thought it was a problem. We were thinking, everyone's going to be so mad at us. But we were able, the format gives you so many opportunities to turn problems into, advantages.
Yeah, I mean, the format being, it's an online platform. It's not a radio show where you have a fixed time. So you can be really flexible in that. I think I want to go to this second cut of tape. So, this is a really good example. You talked about things being really complicated, and I think that is endemic to investigative reporting. What we do is really complicated. Our stories are complicated. Sometimes they're dry. They have a lot of data. And you need to get those in to keep the lawyers happy. In this case, I want you to set up this cut of tape. It's really hard to explain blockchain technology, which is the kind of the special sauce in virtual currency. And you found a pretty creative way to do it. So set up this cut of tape that we're going to hear. It's about 2.5 minutes long, so it's not a shortcut. So there you go.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, we'd spent a lot of time, me and Georgia, writing episodes 1 and 2, because we thought we'll put them out first, we'll get them written, and then we'll do this week by week thing. And we tried so many different ways of doing it, but in the end we realized that we had to make this story work. We had to give a good, clear definition of blockchain at the beginning of episode 2. And our editors and were saying this is terrible. How no one's going to listen to this. Who wants to start a new episode? The second one, where you're really trying to pull people in on episode 2. Episode 1 is get them interested. Episode 2 is get them hooked. How are you going to get anyone hooked if the episode starts with a dry description of a blockchain technology that nobody will understand? Everyone's going to turn off. So me and George just had to sit down and come up with a creative way of describing blockchain. And I had an idea about how to do it that you're going to hear, which I think works really well. And again, everyone loved this. People thought it was actually a positive thing. And maybe once you've heard it, I'll explain why I did it. But this is essentially me trying to describe to my mother over the phone what blockchain is and how it works. And that was the way I thought I'll get people to actually listen to this and not think, oh God, another boring description.
Okay, let's hear that.
So do you remember I was telling you about that cryptocurrency podcast I was doing?
Yeah.
And I said that I was going to write a description of this blockchain technology. I'm here at the moment with Georgia.
Hello, Georgia.
Hiya.
And I was going to read it to you and then ask you to say if it made sense or if you understood it.
Okay. you read it to me, Jamie, and then I will do my best to understand. Right, off you go.
Okay. Why do you value the money that's in your pocket? It's because other people do. Money is worth something because other people think it is. Everything's about trust. So money, whether it's gold, Bank of England notes or matchsticks, only works when everybody else trusts it. Now, for years, people had tried to create a digital money that other people could trust, but it always failed. This is because, imagine if I created an online currency called the Jamie dollar. What would stop me from giving myself $1 million Jamie dollars or stealing your Jamie dollars for me? Bitcoin was designed to be a solution to this problem, and that's why it became so popular. It has a special type of database called a blockchain, and a blockchain is like a huge book, and everyone who owns Bitcoin has their own copy of this book. So every time a Bitcoin is sent from me to Georgia, a copy of that transaction goes into everyone's book. People are excited about this because most normal databases, like an SQL database, has someone in charge who can change the entries. For example, me giving myself 1,000 Jamie dollars. But blockchain is different to normal databases because nobody, not the banks or the governments or the person who invents it, is in charge and can change it. It's run by the people who use it. Now there's some very clever mathematics behind all of this, but it basically means that bitcoins can't be faked, they can't be hacked, and they can't be double spent. So when people hold on to this digital money, they can trust that it has some value. All right, that's the end. Does that make sense to you?
No, not really, Jamie, I'm sorry.
It didn't work. I mean, maybe it worked for the podcast, but not for your mother. You're muted.
Unmute. Here we go. Oh, I'm back. Yeah. See, the thing is, what followed on from that is my mum asked some really good questions. So I knew she wouldn't understand what I was talking about. And that was the point. I wanted people to laugh at the end where she says, no, I just don't get it. I still don't get it. Because I knew a lot of people listening wouldn't get it either. But I wanted them to not feel bad. I wanted them to realize, you know what? His mum doesn't get it. I don't get it. Doesn't matter. What matters is it's important. So I now know blockchains matter for the story. And if there's a cryptocurrency without a blockchain, that's a problem. So I just really wanted to get that across in a humorous way and make people feel okay to not understand. And my her first question was basically, so can I spend it at the supermarket? Which is what 90% of people will probably think. And so she also says at the end, you should probably try again, Jamie. Probably try again and with a slightly better description, which got people interested, got them laughing, and then the story's moved on, and we're now back on it. So I had a lot of people saying that's a smart way to do it.
And so the story goes on, and you have your adventures, and eventually you, I think through some sources, come up with a figure of $4 billion. Is that's correct? I mean, that's how much money you think was essentially stolen.
It's very, very hard to calculate. Those numbers are based on partial figures, their internal company documents. They tally up with what the FBI has estimated. I suspect it's slightly higher than that. One of the real difficulties, though, with these kinds of scams is how you calculate losses, because you also have the loss number of what people believed they held in assets. So you have the real world losses, but you also have the kind of, I don't know what you call it really, the felt losses by the people that believe. The same with Bernie Madoff. People believed they were holding millions of dollars that weren't even there because they thought their investments had been increasing in value. So if you work out that number, that is orders of magnitude higher. And the losses are hard to calculate with a pyramid scheme because a lot of the money invested went back to the sellers of the scam who were making good profits, and they were making money. So it's such a hard number, but again, with these kinds of stories, you need a number. You need something memorable that people can kind of grab onto and understand the scale of it.
And so you touched on this, and I want to bring you into this, Camilla, as well. Identify the key differences between doing the story as a podcast and doing it, in a more traditional print way. What were the big advantages to doing it as a podcast series?
Is that's for me, is it?
Well, you can start, and then I want to hear from Camilla as well.
I mean, there's many, and I've talked about some of them earlier, about certain disadvantages working to your favor. One very obvious one is length of time. The 9 episodes we've got so far, and there'll be more, must account for at least 7 hours of, maybe 6.5 to 7 hours of footage now. And to write an essay that's 6.5 or 7 hours worth of stuff, I mean, nowhere prints that kind of length. Maybe every now and again the New Yorker, and that's it. So the ability to go into character development and put little clues in and have a real long story arc and go off on tangents that are interesting in their own right, which when you're written pieces, it's very hard to go off on a totally different tangent and then come back to the main story. But in a podcast format, you really can do that, as long as you've got a thread running through. So it freed you up to go into all these interesting subplots, sub-areas, talk about the religious element, talk about the money laundering, the cult element, all sorts of interesting little parts of the story that you could really elaborate on. But the other one is the ability to use audio footage. There was so much material on YouTube. Ruja giving talks, or some of the other fellow promoters talking about their lives and what they were doing and the promises they were making, because everybody goes to events with phones and videos them themselves. So because of the story was so emotional, the ability to use historic audio footage that's all available online, I think transformed the story, made it so much more compelling to listen to.
That is one of the benefits of social media. Everyone having phones, everyone recording. I mean, there is a wealth of material for something like a podcast, depending on the story. Camilla, I'm curious your thoughts on that.
So I entirely agree with Jamie in terms of the ability and the flexibility that podcasting as a platform offers. The idea that you can do a 2-minute episode one week and a 22-minute episode the next week, and your listener will come with you. I mean, it's an incredibly flexible format. But to me, one of the other really incredible strengths, specifically of investigative podcasting and narrative journalism in a podcasting space, is this idea of being able to take people on a journey with you, which you simply can't do in a written piece as effectively or in a video piece. There's no other platform in my way of thinking, maybe social media comes close if you do it carefully, but to my way of thinking, audio and specifically podcasting offers us the best opportunity to take people behind the curtain with us, to build a relationship with them. Audio is such an intimate medium. It's so good at connecting people, and the connection that you can form via audio, because it lives in your mind, and as the listener you're being asked to co-create images and scenes and ideas with the podcast host as they're taking you through the story. It's so intimate and it's so powerful as a result, and that connection to me is a real opportunity to build trust. And that's what makes me really excited about news podcasting, and specifically this sort of long format investigative style, is that ability to take people into your confidence, to be personal with them, to connect with them on a personal level, stripping away that aloofness that John was talking about earlier. Yes, we remain detached, but that doesn't mean we have to be aloof. And if we can be conversational in our reporting, and we can bring people into the story and take them into our confidence, I think the levels of trust and loyalty that we can build are enormous. That's what gets me really excited about podcasting.
Jamie, what was the reach of the podcast? How many downloads, or however you calculate that?
Don't know exactly, because it's across so many different platforms and globally. And I don't think everyone shares all the numbers with everybody else. But I know that the BBC Sounds numbers were, last time I heard, I think it was 4 or 5 million downloads from BBC Sounds alone, and it was obviously it was on Spotify, and it was on iTunes, and it was on all these other ones as well. So I couldn't tell you an exact number, but it's several million.
So this is an example of one kind of podcast. It's time consuming. It's not cheap, this kind of podcast. But Camilla, there's a lot of other kinds of podcasts that lend themselves to newsrooms in different formats. I just want to ask you about that a little bit. And I also just want to ask, at a very practical level, what can newsrooms do if they're thinking about podcasts, but this is like, they're not going to do a 9-part series with this incredible music and scoring, including, what was it, the Bulgarian Women's Choir of London?
The London Bulgarian Choir, who wrote, we commissioned them to write music, which was partly, we asked them to write music that for a Bulgarian audience would appreciate some of the lyrics as well. So it was very atmospheric on purpose, but there was a lot of just the language. I mean, the main score, the main song is actually Rouge, about Rouge's name. So we really, we put a lot of effort into that because we knew how important that bit of it was.
Okay, so you're a newsroom and you don't have a choir. What are your options?
Michael, I think, again, what excites me so much about podcasting is that the options are virtually endless. Podcasting is often referred to as the wild west of news media and broadcast news media at the moment, and it's because it's such a flexible, experimental space. If you look at something like what the New York Times does every day, The Daily, one of the most successful news podcasts out there, I'm sure many people in this room are fans of it. They do a deep dive into one topic every morning, and they generate revenue from that. We never really get an exact figure, but a significant part of their revenue comes from their podcasting arm. So you get daily podcasts that are either researched and scripted and presented, or are a discussion type podcast. You get many different types of conversations. I think a lot of what we're used to when we think about podcasting is interview style podcasting. It's a very effective medium and a very effective way of transmitting information, but it's not all that's out there. How-to podcasts are really interesting as well, and I think without sort of listing an endless number, because there are an endless number, I think the key thing to remember about podcasting at the moment is that there aren't any rules in terms of what you can do. There are some guidelines, but if you want to do a 2.5-hour deep dive into an obscure topic, as long as you've got the audience, you can do that.
Right, and I if I'm not mistaken, I believe in Bulgaria there are interview-style podcasts that cover the news. I don't know if any of the folks here are doing that, but that is obviously the easiest. Is you have a story coming out, and you do an interview. But those can be really boring if they're not. I mean, it requires a little bit more than just sitting down and chit-chatting.
Yeah, I mean, so what I don't. So there are certain things that podcasting is and certain things that podcasting isn't. And to me, what podcasting isn't is a repetition of what you might hear on a radio station, for instance. So if you have a radio we have a bad habit in South Africa of radio stations topping and tailing interviews that are done on a radio, live on radio, and then putting it up online and calling it a podcast. That to me is not a podcast. That's repurposing of content, right? Podcasts are very specifically on-demand audio. So you have a highly engaged audience. You have an audience who's likely, if they listen past 90 seconds, to listen to the end of your podcast. I think it's something like 85% of people will listen to a podcast to the end after a certain threshold. And so you do need to cater for those people. You need to remember that you're not dealing with a general audience. You're dealing with a very focused, specific audience who've opted into what you're talking about.
And, again, for a newsroom, why should they bother?
It's a good question. So for me, the answer is twofold. Number one, we are seeing a resurgence of audio around the world. I mean, at the moment, we're up now to about 2 million podcasts worldwide. Some estimates put the number of episodes worldwide at around 48 million. And of the 2 million podcasts that have been created, around 37% of them are currently active. What does that mean? That they've published an episode in the last 90 days, right? So it's a very active space and it's a very lively space. But the real trick here is that the barrier to entry in terms of podcasting is coming down all the time. So it used to be that you would have to have incredibly sophisticated audio equipment, right? You'd have to have some means of broadcasting it. So you'd have to have a radio station or some means of reaching your audience. These days, the barrier to entry, both in terms of technology and in terms of publishing, is next to nothing. So it's cheap. And it's easy to do. And with a newsroom full of digital natives, as Generation Z come in and take over the workplace, with a newsroom full of people who are used to operating on their phones, they're editing TikTok videos, they're using sound, they're sending voice notes, they're more familiar with audio than ever before. And being able to really introduce they are far more comfortable than the old guard of journalism in doing that. So the barrier to entry is really low, and you've got this generation who are super interested. And then, of course, with the rise of the smartphone, they're always connected. We're all always connected, and so that on-demand aspect becomes really important as well.
Yeah, and I mean, what we've seen, and a lot of other podcasts have seen, is it's a much, much younger audience, significantly younger, which is usually of interest to advertisers or underwriters. Jamie, I want to ask you, why is that the case? Why? I mean, I'm sure you found this with the podcast queen, missing crypto queen, but and you probably have a huge, diverse audience base. But what is it about podcasts, these kinds of podcasts, that are attracting a younger audience?
I don't really know the answer to that, but I can say that almost there's a sort of backlash against the idea of social media driven, short, snappy, catchy, clickbaity articles. And somehow I think there's been a slight sort of turning off some of that culture and embracing longer form, more thoughtful. I never would have imagined that millions of young people would listen to 6-hour-long interviews by Joe Rogan, but now it's fairly routinely done. And I think absolutely, as the barriers to entry come down and the quality of the product is going up and up and up, it just makes more sense. And I think these things, they absolutely agree about the intimacy the platform, of the format, makes a huge difference to people. I do think that really crucially, the best podcasts and the ones that appeal to everyone are those that respect the format of the podcast. Like you say, it's not just a case of top and tailing something else. It's its own thing that deserves its own approach, its own philosophy. The BBC's view on this has always been, it's not about young people or old people. Good quality content that respects the format, that's a good story, that has an arc, emotional resonance. You're 16, you enjoy it. You're 75, you enjoy it. Everyone in between will. It doesn't matter about the age. Focus on producing something good, and all ages will come to it. And I think they might even be moving away a little bit from this. What do young people like? Young people like the same stuff old people like, if it's got a good storyline and it's exciting and compelling and emotionally resonant.
I want to hear some questions. We do have one online which connects with what you just said, Jamie, which is there a danger of a newsroom saying, oh, we got to get with the revolution and with the podcast revolution and jump in and do something? And is there a risk of doing something that isn't so good and flooding the market with just a mediocre podcast?
The market's already flooded. Wouldn't worry too much about that. I mean, you experiment with these things, and I think part of what podcasts allow you to do is to be open, and we tried to create the style of our podcast so that we took, as you've already heard, we took people behind the curtain. This is how we're going to work. This is how we're going to operate. We're going to make mistakes. We'll be honest about the mistakes we make. And I think there is something about the way modern media works that listeners expect to be told more than just the story. They want to know what's going on behind. They want to know the people who are making it, how they're making it, how they're thinking about it. So making mistakes and being honest about it doesn't really matter. And I so agree. Look, some people spend so much money on buying expensive equipment when, frankly, voice memo on this is about 95% as good as all your amazing fancy kit. And if you've got good music behind, and there's a lot of good free music you can use, it's the same. It's as good. So you can cheaply experiment. You don't need to spend a lot of money experimenting, and it's definitely worth a go.
If I could add on to that, Michael, the other thing that I would say is, when we think about podcasting, to me, it's the same discussion no matter what the medium is, and that we have to, as journalists, always remember to think content first. So rather than trying to fit a square peg into a round hole and saying, oh, we need to do a podcast, everyone's doing it, let's do a podcast. You want to look for opportunities where a podcast is the best medium to tell a story. It's about the story, it's not about the medium. And podcasting offers an amazing platform for certain types of stories, but it's not for everything. And I don't think we need to ram it down people's throats. It's not podcasting for podcasting's sake. It's not innovation for innovation's sake. It's what is the best medium to tell this story. And if your story is something that can live in audio, if you've got the tape, if you've got that cinematic quality that we can bring to narrative journalism on a podcasting platform, then by all means go for it. But I don't think we need to force the issue either.
All right, Jamie, I'm going to put you on the spot, and I know that you're going to tell us, okay? And it's the question everyone here has, which is, Къде е Dr. Ruja? Where is Dr. Ruja? Where do you think she is?
Why don't you ask Nikolai first? And
Nikolai, please.
You can tell us. I looked around the room. I don't see her. I don't know. Is she in your basement, Jamie?
Oh dear. You know, I obviously am not going to answer that because I don't have an answer. One of the most, I mean, I have something of an answer, but I couldn't tell you guys right now. Maybe I'll chat with you, Nikolai, afterwards. But I think the important thing about the podcast was something we had to embrace the possibility that we weren't going to fit, the story wouldn't finish with us finding her. So don't assume, because of the way it's about a journey, you don't need a clear resolution at the end. It's okay to have said, we failed, but hopefully the sort of journey you went on as we tried to figure this out was enough. to keep you involved. That was the story. You learned a lot through that, even if we didn't get this final resolution.
But you wouldn't be doing a new season if you didn't have something juicy.
I'll tell you another thing. The BBC, I keep mentioning the BBC big bosses because they're easy to blame. They basically said, new episodes have basically now got to focus in on where she is. Forget all the other stuff about explaining how money laundering works. People listening want to know where she is. That's all we really want you to do now.
I've got more questions, but I want to see if anyone in the room has any questions for any of our panelists. We've got a couple of online, but for those of you who have listened to the podcast, anything that you want to ask about? Well, while we're waiting, I've got one. There were a lot of surprises in this podcast, which you spoon out very carefully. What was one of the biggest surprises for you, Jamie?
Yeah, there were. I suppose the first thing was I struggled at the beginning to believe that this scam could be as big as people claimed because of how little I had heard of it. But when I went to the small village in Uganda, and it took a lot of organising, of course, and was quite a scary trip. And I found small villages where everybody in the village knew Ruja Ignatova's name. And loads of them had invested in OneCoin. And it had gone from Sofia. I mean, it's a Bulgarian story, but it's a global story. Ruja Ignatova was a German citizen as well, German passport holder. Co-founder was Swedish and British. It covered the globe. As we got really deep down to the bottom of the pyramid and you'd see how many people had really invested in this, I couldn't believe, I just couldn't believe it. But it made the whole story make sense. And then, of course, every now and again, one of the things we tried to do to bring listeners in was to ask at the end of every episode, get in touch with us if you've got any clues, any tips, any sightings, any information, and we'll try to investigate it. And we got all sorts of stuff. She's living in Buckingham Palace with the Queen. She's on Vladimir Putin's private yacht. Da 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 da. So it was interesting, but we were pulling in clues. But one of the funny things was that OneCoin HQ in Sofia started making hit videos about me, sort of insulting me, saying I wasn't a real journalist, that I was stupid, that I'd made all these mistakes. But because we were doing it week by week, we were able to take their videos and then include them in some of our episodes to kind of poke fun back at them again. So seeing that and being able to integrate it into the episodes, I wouldn't say it was the most surprising thing, but I'd never done anything like that before. So that was really fun. We could kind of be a bit playful with it. That was really interesting.
No, that's the kind of authenticity that I think a lot of people like, or I think it is honest and it feels honest, that you're sort of poking fun at yourself in a way. One thing you explore is why people essentially put their faith in this fraudster, and did people's gullibility or willingness to do that surprise you?
The one thing I sort of conclude, and it's always good to try to boil things down into simple ideas, the one thing that surprised me there was the power of one psychological trait we have, which is the fear of missing out. If I could boil all of these different things down into one reason so many people went for this, it was the fear of missing out. Bitcoin had made people millionaires. I missed the boat. This is my chance. And the power of that single fear overrode regulator warnings, the impossible business models, ludicrous marketing materials, absolutely insane promises. All of that could be dismissed and ignored because of the fear of missing out. And I think that surprised me, just how strong a force that actually was, or is.
I've got more questions. Oh, go ahead.
If I may add on that, the one thing that most surprises me is that OneCoin is still active today. The whole thing didn't end with the podcast Jamie did. It didn't end with the court cases in the U.S. Rosa's brother is arrested, and he has collaborated with the U.S. prosecutors. He basically says, I did all these things. I was involved in a scam. And now there is, from a few days, there is an ongoing court case in Germany as well. And still, probably not in US, probably not in Europe, but it is still active in a way, not the same people. Other people have jumped on this train, and they're still kind of milking this cow to the last. There are still people at some places in the world who are still giving their money for that, even though they can Google it, the Wikipedia page of OneCoin would say a possible Ponzi scheme, but no, it is alive.
You visit their building here in Sofia. That's not still their HQ. That's not still.
It is still there. It's not so on the first floor there was like a showroom. It is not functioning, but people are entering the building from time to time. And so it's active in a way. I don't know how many people. According to the registers here, the Bulgarian company, which is kind of operating OneCoin, because it's we are speaking it as one entity, but it's actually companies all over the world. But the Bulgarian company has like 20 employees or something like that, still running.
Any questions? Okay, I'll keep asking. Obviously, from a journalism standpoint, we see the global reach. We see another example of how the internet, the dark side of the internet, I guess. What about more nuts and bolts regulatory failures here, Jamie? Is that important? I mean, journalistically, that would be a big question. Talk about that a little bit.
Very difficult. The one problem, I suppose, when you're working on an unfolding story is how unwilling the authorities are to speak to you. So you're open to making mistakes. You can sort of say that they've failed with this or with that, and then 2 weeks later they arrest someone and they've actually been working on a case all along. So that was always part of a problem. The City of London police dropped their formal investigation into OneCoin one day before our first episode aired, which the promoters of OneCoin used to discredit our work. And it was very frustrating, and I sometimes wonder whether the police knew our report was coming and sort of I don't know why the timing was so terrible. So the difficulty with an international pyramid Ponzi scheme, which most of them are, is it's not always clear who has regulatory authority over them. And as a result, different countries have different rules. Some countries issue warnings, some countries have arrested people, other countries haven't arrested anybody. And in that confusion, scam artists can take advantage because they will say, we're still operating openly in country X, Y, and Z. None of our key founders have yet been arrested or convicted. So it's very difficult legally to explain the kind of legal status. And when we'd have discussions with lawyers, they'd say, okay, so what exactly, has it been, has it been sort of determined by a court of law to be a Ponzi scheme? And you say, well, it depends on the jurisdiction, and then, and some countries have different rules about that. And so it was a legal headache, to be perfectly honest with you. And companies like this know that. They understand that. And they know that if there's a single thing I could say about a pyramid scheme, it's that they spring up quickly. The regulators are very slow to react, because they've got to work it out for them. So first they've got to hear about it, then they've got to investigate it, then they've got to determine legally what they can say about it, whether they have jurisdiction over it. And all the while, the pyramid scheme is going like this and growing exponentially. By the time they've moved, 1 million people have already signed up and lost their money. So it's incredibly, speed is of the essence in this world. And unfortunately, regulators just aren't equipped for that.
Camilla, back to a more practical question about podcasts and newsrooms starting podcasts or doing them. I mean, realistically, can podcasts enhance revenue? I mean, can they help you on that front?
I think the answer is a qualified yes, and it also depends on the appetite for the podcast. So, I mean, the way that the media houses that I've worked with on podcasting have operated is that we'll have some podcasts that are branded or sponsored, so funded by outside corporate entities, and others that we do in-house. Very often, I think we mentioned earlier, getting an investigative podcast is incredibly difficult, getting it sponsored, right? That's not the kind of information that brands necessarily want to ally themselves with. But I think where there is an opportunity for revenue, certainly in news broadcasting, is on topics that are of interest to people but aren't necessarily overly controversial, right? So investigations are sometimes a bit of a problem, but there is great space for branded, sponsored content living as podcasting. And to my way of thinking, I mean, the number one reason that people listen to podcasts is for educational purposes, right? So they want information. They want something that's useful to them. And if you can deliver something that is useful to them while working with a sponsor or a partner, then I think everyone gets what they need from the arrangement. So I think the opportunity for revenue there is huge. Also, I think what a lot of newsrooms are doing, certainly in more developed countries as well, is moving some of their flagship podcasts behind paywalls. And that then becomes a huge driver of subscriptions in some cases. If you think about Slate, for instance, in the US, Slate and its podcasting, they use the podcast sitting behind the paywall to drive subscriptions because it's John mentioned earlier this idea of value and offering people premium value content. Podcasts are that. A well-done podcast is premium content, and people will be willing to pay for it. And you can use it almost as a lever to get people into the world of paid news as well. So I think there are multiple streams that we can exploit with podcasting, but not every podcast is going to generate revenue, and not every podcast should.
Can I add one?
Yes.
Can I add a revenue stream on this? Because I know this will be of interest to people, and it may be specific to the long-form investigative podcast format, which is there is a huge demand among streaming platforms, the Disneys and Apples and Amazons and Netflix of this world, to produce long-form sort of dramatic or documentary series, multiple parts. And one of the things I've noticed with the Missing Crypto Queen and others is an incredible demand from documentary makers and filmmakers to buy the rights to the podcast, to turn it into a long television series, because these long form stories have all the elements of a good box set, a sort of Sopranos or Narcos or one of these, and podcasts are really good ways to sell that, because you've done a lot of the hard investigative journalistic work, and then it's taken over by screenwriters and scriptwriters who do all the exciting stuff and turn it into something beautiful and brilliant. But therefore, what becomes really important is who owns the intellectual property. And I've known a lot of people that have signed over intellectual property to their podcast to whoever's made it for them or sponsored it, and then they go and sell it for a fortune to Netflix or whatever. So in a world where lots of different platforms and TV companies are competing for good stories, podcasts can be an amazing pipeline for those stories, but you've got to try to keep control over the intellectual property as the creators of it.
Nikolai, could you see news podcasts expanding in Bulgaria? Is there a potential?
Yeah, I think it is an intriguing option. It's been around for some years, and our newsroom is also doing a bit of podcasting. I think it's pretty nascent so far. It's like a weekly wrap-up of our most important topics that we have in the issue, and etc. So it's not something grand scale, but I really think it is something we are considering in the newsroom to be invested in. But I'm not the person who is involved in that project too much. and really don't know the details. But yeah, we have 1 or 2 people dedicated on that, so probably we will be doing it. And there are some other podcasts, independent, outside of the mainstream media and the newspapers, who are pretty very listened to.
For people here who don't speak English, had you produced a Bulgarian language version of the Crypto Queen, do you think it would have had a strong audience?
I think in Bulgaria, the story is kind of, we feel it as at home. We have given something to the world. It's like this small nation, even though it's a scam, it's still something we've given to the world. And I guess there is this part shame, part proudness of this story. I'm personally working on not so much podcast, but it's still an audio. I'm currently writing an audio book on OneCoin and on that. It will be in Bulgarian and probably also in other languages. It will be with Storytel. It's a company which is kind of subscription for audiobooks. You pay a monthly fee and you listen to as much as you want to. So probably it will be ready in some months. And I think, and they specifically demanded for me to write it in Bulgarian and to be firstly in Bulgarian and then next probably translate it into other languages if there is demand. So obviously they see potential in that. So I think the story would have been interesting in Bulgarian as well. If
I just want to ask this one question. We're running out of time. Jamie, for you, possibly for you, Nikolai. It's something I hadn't thought of, but it's a question we received, and I think I'm understanding it right. Some people say any publicity is good publicity, even negative publicity. So is it conceivable that people heard about this currency on your podcast and invested in spite of everything you were saying about it? Is that possible?
Oh, don't say that. Well, the thing is, the reality is that I did see cases of OneCoin promoters selling OneCoin, saying as featured on the BBC, with a picture of Rouge's, with the artwork we created, with this kind of missing crypto queen, as featured on the BBC, world famous cryptocurrency. So in the end, scammers will take advantage of any possible way they can try to look legitimate. And if that means as featured on the BBC, yes. So I'm sure some people did. I only hope that that was outnumbered by, and I know people who've done this, who were thinking about investing in another similar scheme, and their friend said, you know, you should listen to this podcast I heard before you do, and that's persuaded them not to. You got to remember, I have people coming up to me. I'm so intimate with the story, but people who come up to me that loved the podcast, listened to it a year ago, but their understanding is, oh yeah, this woman, and she like ran off with everyone's money. It was like Bitcoin, but she disappeared. But the level of sort of retention of the story that people have is so minimal. They'll just about remember it was a missing woman who disappeared with all the money. So you've got to make it so sort of clear and simple as a single story, understanding people don't know the detail like you do. But I hope that what we achieved, and this is why the BBC partly funded it, was it educated some people into being slightly more skeptical about get-rich-quick schemes. That was the main idea for them, really. And so I hope, on balance, we did that.
I think you did.
Yeah, to add on that, I don't think that anyone would have specifically invested in OneCoin after this, but probably it would have been a tutorial for future scammers. Okay, that's how it's done. So probably I should listen to that and come up with something like that.
To understand what went wrong, so you can not make the same mistakes that Dr. Rouge made.
True. That's true. That's true. Yeah, the current wave of crypto MLM hybrids are slightly smarter, slightly wiser, slightly better designed.
Well, on that note, I want to thank all of you. It's a great podcast. And Jamie, thanks for joining us from London, and Camilla and Nikolai. Thanks very much.